Hi, I'm Reverend Sheena Metal, and welcome to Saturday Night Spiritual. I am the interfaith pastor at Founders Metropolitan Community Church in Hollywood. And for just a little over 4 years now, we've been bringing you this service on the second Saturday of every month. This is a universal, light-based, love-filled service. It's for everyone. It's what my mama used to call a y'all come service. It's for all different faiths to come together under the banner of interfaith and try to bring more peace and more love and more kindness and more unity and a higher vibration to the world. I'm so honored to be a part of Founders MCC, and I'm so honored to be able to bring this service to you every month. You can find us at foundersmcc.org. The info will be up on the screen throughout the show. And you can find our community page at SaturdayNightSpiritual.com. And I also have a page with all of the archives, so you can watch old services if you want, former services. It's at RevSheena.FoundersMCC.com. This is kind of a special service. It's the first time that we have, in a virtual platform, used this new software where I can bring in guests and people to speak. Honored to be doing that, and honored to my engineer and producer Emery for helping me to make this happen, because it takes a village. Also, it's a sad occasion, a bittersweet occasion, but I'm trying to think of it as a happy occasion because we're all coming together in love to celebrate our dear friend Steve Pieters, the Reverend Steve Pieters, who himself was a pastor here at Founders MCC. Everybody that is on the screen today with me is a person that loves Steve and a person that I love. And some of them I love because of Steve, and some of them Steve knew me because of them. I want to talk a little bit throughout this hour. I want you to think about really inspiration and friendship. But even more than friendship, really inspiration, because when you think about life, and I like to think about life as a wheel, and around the outside of that wheel is everything that's happened before and everything that will come. And one of the things that I love about the serendipitous nature of the universe is the way that everything is connected to everything else. And you are inspired by others, and then you turn around and you inspire others. And I think when you think about that, being inspired by something, and then others are inspired by you because you were inspired by that, to me, that's so much the essence of who Steve Pieters was. He was an inspiration. He was a force of light on the earth. My mama used to say that some people are a ball of light with just a tiny bit of skin stretched around them. And that's really what Steve was. He was a ball of light, veiled in a human form. And he was such an inspiration to me. And because of his inspiration, he inspired me to become a person who inspires other people. And I'll tell you a little story that I always think of when I think of him. There are many stories throughout this hour of how he brought me here. This service is because of him. This all happened because of him. So when I first got the download from Spirit to become a minister, I was terrified. I was not anybody who ever wanted to be a minister. Never occurred to me to be a minister. And my very dear friend, Allison Arngrim, who will be here with us today, whom I met Steve through, we were at a birthday party at this Mediterranean restaurant for her husband, Bob. And it was this long table with like 40 people. And Steve and I were all the way at the end together. And we were just chit-chatting. And I looked at him and I took his hand and I said, so I guess I'm a minister now. And I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm terrified. And he just looked at me in that Steve Pieters way with all that wisdom and all that kindness. And he said, but really, honey, look back at your life. Everything that you've done, isn't that really your ministry? And he was right. I realized it's what I had done my whole life. I just didn't call it that. And I didn't have a title. But people who are in service, we spend our lives in service to other people. And he really understood the idea of service, even when he was very ill or in a lot of pain. Throughout his life, he battled many diseases, many illnesses, AIDS, cancer, 3 times. He never lost his grace, and he never stopped fighting for others, even when he was fighting for his own life. And to me, that is an inspiration for all of us. And everybody that you will see today during this service was inspired by him and have inspired others because of him. So I'd like to bring up first our senior pastor here at Founders MCC, Keith Mazingo, who, no surprise, I met because of Steve. In Keith, I have found a true brother, and I believe that Steve knew that. And Steve, do you know the story of how you wound up on my? Keith, do you know the story of how you wound up on my show?
Yes, I do. Hi, by the way.
Hi, sweetheart.
Very good to see you. Steve was obviously a member of our church. He's been a minister in MCC for many years. And when I moved out here to Los Angeles from the South, he was here to greet me, as the other ministers were and the other church members. But Steve and I had lunch not long after I got here, and he said, do you know Sheena Metal? Are you familiar with Sheena Metal and her show, Raising the Vibration? And I said, no, I'm not, because, I had just gotten here. I really didn't know any of the local stuff. And he said, well, I want to take you to see Sheena and meet her. She's a dear friend, and I want you to meet her, and I want you to experience this Raising the Vibration. So I went, and I sat 2 seats down from Orlando, who you'll meet later in this program. And at some point, of course, I was just mesmerized with Sheena and the whole Raising the Vibration, which, of course, gave me the idea. This really, I felt like I had been to church. I mean, it was different language, but it was spiritual, and it was uplifting. It raised my vibration. It raised my spirit. And at some point, Sheena, you mentioned you have to go out now and meet someone that you haven't spoken to, someone you don't know, someone you didn't ride with. So Steve went to the right and I went to the left, and Orlando was standing right there. So I became friends with Orlando, and I, of course, got to meet you after service. And then before long, Steve had connected you and me, and you said, well, you have to come and do the radio show. So we did the radio show too. You were talking about connections. So the people on this program today, Steve kind of connected most of us. I actually had another connection with Allison many years ago. I don't know if she would remember me from this because I was a little starstruck at the time. But Allison came to one of our general conferences for our denomination, Worldwide General Conference, to speak because of all that she had done for the LGBTQ community, and especially those living with HIV and AIDS. And of course, Steve was our ambassador around the world for AIDS, for our AIDS ministry. When AIDS hit the world, Steve was one of the first few people that got AIDS, not first people that got it. He's one of the few people that have survived it all of these years. And, he had a degree in theater and was doing shows. And at some point, he contracted AIDS and was able to live through that. I'm sure Allison will tell a little more about that when she comes on. But she came to one of our general conferences, and I met her there. Of course, she met hundreds of people. I think there were about 1,000 people at the conference from around the world. So I'm sure she doesn't remember all of us. But I was a little starstruck with her, just thinking how wonderful it was that this person who was not LGBT, who was willing to befriend us and willing to take a stand and to help us fight the stigma that was coming from that, and also to help us change. I don't know if you know this, we lost over half of our male ministers in the 80s and 90s due to AIDS. And Steve was one who he was an ambassador. He went around the world speaking, and he came to our church. He's one of the first people I met when I came to MCC. He came and preached for us, shared his testimony, and he had a fairy wand. And
Yes.
that fairy wand he carried all over the world. And he
Yes.
said he was like a fairy. He was sprinkling fairy dust everywhere he went as a form of prayer, as a
Yes.
form of healing ministry to the rest of the world. And of course, that wand is now in the Smithsonian Institute in their LGBTQ archives.
And his other one, because he had a backup that he kept with him, he brought up at the first Saturday Night Spiritual. He was one of the first
That's
speakers,
right.
as were you. And he brought that with him and told the story of that wand.
Yes.
He fought for me to meet you. I don't know if you know that, but I had done, when I started my raisingthevibration.org nonprofit, I started doing these vibration gatherings that Keith was speaking of. And a mutual friend of Steve and mine, Hersha Parody, who was on Little House on the Prairie, and I met her through Allison, and so did Steve. She came to one, and she sent me a text afterwards, and she said, I've never been to anything like that. I'm going to call Steve Pieters and tell him he has to make you a minister at Founders MCC. So a couple of days later, I get a text message from Steve. He's like, I'm a retired pastor there, and I can't really make decisions anymore. But I'm going to introduce you to our new senior pastor, Keith Mazingo, because I have a feeling that something magic is going to happen. And certainly he was right, because not only am I so honored to be a part of this church, Keith, and you know, because I tell you that all the time, but you have touched my life in such a way, and I couldn't love you anymore if you were my own brother that I had known since birth. And I'm so thankful for that connection, and that was all because of Steve.
Absolutely. And the feeling's mutual.
I love you very much, and I thank you so much for being here. And we're all going to keep Steve in our hearts forever. I'm sure we'll be more talking about him, but it means so much that you took the time to be here with me today.
Absolutely. We want to honor Steve every way we can.
Thank you, sweetheart. Thank you. And that was Steve, right? He would just connect people because he was loving. And, you know, I grew up not in a church, and growing up in Orange County, California in the 80s, when it was so fundamentalist down here, I developed kind of a weird taste in my mouth for churches. I didn't think I'd ever be a part of a church, but the first time I went to Founders to a service, Steve was with me as my date. We laughed, and he held my hand during the whole service. And for the first time I took communion, he was there the night that I got baptized by Keith. He was there the day I became a member of the church. He just seems like he was always there with like a big smile and a loving hug. And I met him in a Chinese restaurant at a birthday party for our mutual friend, Allison Argram, who's with us today as well. And in addition to being this great holy man, he was a lover of Chinese food. And how do you not like that? So Allison's going to come in and talk for a while about him. And what an honor, Allison, to have you here as well. Hi, sweetheart.
Thank you. Hi. Yeah, okay, so all of these stories are, and then Allison introduced me, and then I said Allison's birthday, and then I said Bob, Allison's husband's birthday, and Allison, you told me when we first met that I was the gateway celebrity, that early on, you had me on your show 100 years ago to be interviewed, and then after that, you were approaching other celebrities, other ex-child stars, etc., and they would go, oh, wait, Allison did it, oh, can I be on it? Yeah, and you said, I'm the gateway celebrity, like the gateway drug, and now you know everybody.
Yeah, and some of them you just flat out said to me. You gave me a list, and we're just like, you're going to have this one and this one.
They're good. They're good. Yeah.
You know what? The first day I met you, when you first did my show, and I asked you to come do my show because within a week, 3 people said to me, have you ever had Allison Argram on your show? And I believe, you know, as you know, knowing me because we're friends now, I'm all about serendipity and clandestine stuff. And I knew the minute that you came in the studio and sat across from me that we were going to be friends, because there is such a goodness and a light in you and a beauty inside of you. And I just had Charlotte Stewart on my show last week from Little House. And we were talking about about what a tribe builder you are. You put people together, you keep people together. That's your ministry, right? You spread love and connection everywhere you go. And so it doesn't surprise me that you and Steve attached to each other and became family, because you both have that thing where you understand that as people, we're stronger together, that you're
Well,
stronger the bigger your tribe is.
100 years ago in the 80s, in 86, we started volunteering at AIDS Project Los Angeles because of Steve Tracy, who played my husband Little House.
Right.
One of the things I did, I wrote an article called, what the heck did I call that thing? Bandwagon, off the celebrity bandwagon, jumping on the celebrity. There are people been saying, are people jumping on the celebrity bandwagon at that point in the late 80s when there started to eventually be red ribbons and things. And I says, it's not the celebrity bandwagon, it's my friend. My friend is sick. But one of the things I said was, okay, I didn't go to med school, so probably not going to find the cure this week. I'm not a doctor or an epidemiologist or a scientist or a microbiologist. I can't do that. I can't do this. I can't do this. But I am the human Rolodex. And those who remember what a Rolodex is. But yeah, I have everybody's phone number. I have everybody's phone number. I have everybody's address. I have everybody's email. And I realized then that it was something I had been doing. And then at that point, people were saying, oh my God, we're really trying to get hold of someone who knows how to do that. And I went, hey, hang on. Yeah, Bill, yeah, can you call the, and I knew someone. I know someone who does that. I completely know someone who does that. And I hooked people up with people constantly in organizations, and often with huge results, as we've seen. I think it's absolutely bonkers that Hersha Parody was the person who
I knew you would think that story was fantastic. And she kept telling me the whole time.
She needs to be a minister.
She kept saying the whole time, Allison, I never go to things like this and I'll never come again. But
I'll never come again. Yes, it's Hersha.
You have to be a minister. And she pushed. And such an interesting person to have made the connection to bring
that is so weird that it's her. And by the way, Hersha is doing much better. As you know, if you've been following Facebook, there was a GoFundMe by her son. She was having surgery and definitely very serious. But it appears that the operation was a grand success. The doctor is very pleased, saying better than they thought. And so it's just, we'll see what the recovery period's like. But it looks like we're getting our Hersha back. It looks like it's all going to be okay.
And I don't know if I might have told you this, but I don't think we've ever talked about it publicly. Hersha and I were having dinner the night I got the call my mom was dying. So Hersha, who is this like kind of not the most squishy, touchy-feely woo-woo person.
She's the old brassy. She's like in like the westerns, the Bravo madam with the heart of gold, and that's her. I'm a tough old broad. She's the meaty, tough old broad in the westerns. I'm a heart of gold. Listen, Buster.
For some reason in my life, she always gets stuck in the middle of the squishy moments. So she's
like a gangster mall. She's like a mall in an old film noir. Buddy.
Exactly. For with me, she is like, oh, you need to be a minister. And oh, your mom's dying. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's why it's so crazy, because it's Hersha.
I know, both times it's Hersha. I know. It's so bizarre. How did Steve inspire you? Because I'm talking about inspiration today, right? Because you're already so involved in the HIV/AIDS movement and such a supporter of the LGBTQI+ community. What did you take from him?
Well, it's so crazy because we're all talking about him now, and people are saying things. It's like an ascended master has left us.
I agree. I referred to him that way. Yes.
Here is a man who loved Mickey Mouse. Here you go. Here he is, a man who loved going to Disneyland and singing show tunes and collected Disney figurines. And this was completely silly. But also whose magic wand is now in the Smithsonian. Yes. What do you say? So he was a bundle of contradictions. He got very healthy in his eating habits later. And I remember when he quit smoking. And of course, we all remember when he stopped drinking. However, there was a period we were going to a lot of the MCC churches around the country, and he still smoked. He had Benson Hedges stuff. And he ate incredible junk food. There was a meeting. He was speaking at a luncheon meeting for persons surviving with AIDS, and a bunch of young men who'd had AIDS for some time and were doing pretty good and really working on it. And of course, he'd had AIDS since 1983. He had it when it was ARC. He had it when it was GRID, when like they didn't even know what it was. So he was there to say, okay, and I've been alive this long. And all these guys were on very strict health food diets, macrobiotic, vegan, all kinds of stuff. And we're trying to do the healthiest things. And he asked me to go pick up his lunch. He said, I got to speak at this thing. Could you go get my lunch? I go, great. What do you want? I'll go anywhere, get anything. Could you go to McDonald's I need a burger and fries, and get me one of them fried pies at Apple. Oh, and a vanilla shake, a vanilla large. And they're all sitting there discussing their rigorous diets they're using to try to stay alive. And he's the long-term survivor, goes, "Oh, good, lunch is here," and pulls out the fries and the shake and the fried pie. And they all went, "What is happening?" So it was very weird because he's like, I don't know. And as he said, my faith was huge. But there were people in the bed next to me back at USC who had enormous faith and who also didn't smoke or eat McDonald's. And he said, and they're not here anymore. I don't know how this works. It's like in the Wizard of Oz with the balloon. I can't come back. I don't know how it works. He's like, I don't know, but this is what I'm doing. And I'm still here for some reason.
Well,
And
don't you think that was part of it, right? Because sometimes, Allison, people who have had diseases or accidents or injuries, or they live like a tainted person the rest of their life. Everything they talk about is the disease. Everything they talk about is what they survived. Oh no, I can't have that because I was sick. Oh no, I can't do that. Steve just lived his life and lived it to the fullest. And I think that might be the secret to longevity.
well, I'm in the middle of writing the blurb for his book, and we're going to do a plug. Yes, we have advertising for Mr. Pieters because his book, Love is the new title, Love is Greater Than AIDS, a memoir of survival, healing, and hope, is being published by Roman and Littlefield in the spring of 2024, next spring. He just finished it. I'm in the process of literally right now, I have it on script, writing the blurb for the back cover. And some of the things I'm like, okay, what do you say about a man who has this wand in the Smithsonian? But one of the things is he never feared death. And that's one of the things where we're all falling apart. I'm a mess since he died last Saturday. It's been a week. It's killing us all. We're just terrible. But he was never afraid. He was never afraid of death. He almost died so many times. And he said, oh, I've been dead for so many seconds or minutes. I've been, how many times have I died? And he had no fear of death. He knew where he was going and what was going to happen. He was completely cool. And because he didn't fear death, because we know a lot of people who fear death are then afraid to live, he had no fear of life. His whole story is of overcoming fear of being your authentic self, fear of being gay when he had to come out of the closet, which I mean, when he came out of the closet 100 years ago and he tells that story, I'm kind of like, did they not know? Because I think they knew. I think everybody knew. His friends and parents had to have gone. But his fear of being his authentic self, his fear of coming out as gay, his fear of then getting AIDS, his fear of getting sick, fear of dying, fear of confronting reality without drugs and alcohol, fear of rejection, fear of all of those things, which he had in spades. And you read his book and how one by one, he stopped. Now, I'm not afraid of this anymore. I'm not afraid of that anymore. I'm not afraid of this anymore. And the lack of fear of death was part of that. So as difficult it is for me and for others that he is gone, it didn't bother him.
Right. Well, and he's in such a good place now. He's in a place now where he can enjoy us all every day. We're the ones that have to feel lost without him. But we don't, because you can remember, and there's a picture of Steve marrying you and Bob, which I think is so beautiful.
Yeah. He officiated our wedding.
That he's really with us all the time. You just need to learn to make a different energetic connection with someone who's passed. He's not going to be somebody we can have Chinese food with, but he's somebody we can have Chinese food together and imagine him there with us. And I think, Allison, you and I need to go when this settles down and we're less grieving. We need to go have Chinese food together and imagine him there with us.
Well, and Thai food, and oh God, did he love my roast Thanksgiving turkeys?
Oh my God, that's right.
But I do make the best turkey in town. What can I say? I'm going back and looking at his old book, and it's just like, okay, literally, I just opened this up. Literally, this is his original book way back. I'm still dancing the route. I want my death to be one of the least stressful events of my life. He literally. He wrote that. He literally wrote that. Perhaps it's naive of me, but I want my death to be grace-filled. I think he pulled that off. He had people in the room, people on the phone. He had everything.
I think he did too. I love you, my friend. I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Buy his book, spring 2024.
Absolutely. We'll talk more about Steve, and there'll be many more radio shows and video shows. We have not had the last of paying tribute to Reverend Steve Pieters. I might in my ministry for the rest of my life. Another wonderful gem that came from me knowing Steve and becoming a pastor at Founders was so Steve came and he did my radio show, and he brought Pastor Keith with him, and we had a blast. And then Pastor Keith and I had lunch, and he asked me to join the church and do my Saturday night spiritual service. So then we celebrated by Steve came back, and this time he not only brought Pastor Keith, but he brought Reverend Lucia Chappelle, who's going to be here in a little while, and Reverend Alejandro Escoto, who is the head of our Spanish-speaking ministry at Founders MCC. And there's a fantastic picture of the four of them waiting to go in my studio that we're going to pop up. And then suddenly I had more brothers, and another brother and a sister that were just part of my ministry family. And for somebody who didn't know how to be a minister, now I suddenly had ministers all around me that were my family. Reverend Alejandro is with us right now. And also my family. It's wonderful to have you here, my friend. I love you, and I wish it were under cheerier circumstances. But I think we're just going to celebrate Steve for the rest of our lives.
Definitely. Death always has a way of bringing the human condition down. But we truly have reason to celebrate. I heard you say just now that, he can be with each and every one of us enjoying
Yes.
Chinese or wherever we are at.
Yes.
And for someone who lived through so many human experiences and being ill, he did not let his illness direct his life. He literally allowed his life perspective to be one of incredible joy that faced the human condition and kept moving forward.
I remember the first time he did my show, Allison brought him with her. And, he was always such a bastion of happy. And he came in and he was happy and he was telling his story and he was spreading his love. And during the commercial break, I was messing around with the technical stuff and putting the ads up. And I heard him talking to Allison about his most recent blood test. Apparently, he had just gotten back from the result of a blood test. And there was a lot of stuff going on there. There was kidney stuff, and he was giving her sort of a whole lowdown of what was going on with him. And then we came back on the air, and it was all happiness and love. And I think a little bit about what Allison talked about, that he had that ability to compartmentalize the pain and the diseases from not allowing it to stop him from really enjoying his life.
Yes.
And I think that's what enabled him to keep fighting. I also think that he was more needed here than he was there. Now he's more needed there. So God took him home, right? But for a long time, I think he was more needed here because he was an inspiration that HIV is not a death sentence, that AIDS is not a death sentence, that cancer is not a death sentence, that you just keep living and loving your way through it. And I think all the people that he healed, I think that turned around and healed him.
Yes, definitely. Yes. When I first met him, I was a deacon at the church, and he needed assistance. Well, ever since I've known him, he had some form of illness, right? The HIV was always in the background, which actualized other illnesses. And I was already HIV positive by that time. And so I would take him to the store. I would pick up groceries. I would do what was needed. And I would coordinate with other people to help him. And over the years in conversation with him, there's this reality that we have a group of people around us that we can just be real with. And then in other parts of our lives, we can show people how this reality that surrounds us doesn't have to naturally, you could say, identify. He and I both agreed that, yes, I'm HIV positive, but HIV doesn't have to define me.
No.
And so that was something that helped him to move forward. And we adapt as we adapt. One thing that he and I also had in common was, he had his fairy wand, and we had these ministry fairs. And so Reverend Elder Nancy Wilson was our senior pastor back then. And so I dressed up as a fairy, and I had a little tutu. Now I keep getting threatened by people I get threatened that, there's a picture of me out there and they will use that if ever they need to. Right. And so, the building that we were with was over on Santa Monica Boulevard. And I managed to like climb up a wall behind the sanctuary and kind of cut, let some balloons loose. And then, tell Nancy, you are an honorary fairy. And then I came back around and ran in with my tutu and threw some, fairy dust on her and got pink, and as any pastor, pastors tend to be very, they like things to go, smoothly. And so Steve loved that. He loved that. And he went on to explain about his little wand and how that we had, great connection, because,
I love that.
this world that we live in, there's
that's one of the things that I loved about him so much, Alex, that you and I talk about a lot when you come and do my shows.
Yes.
Is he was very secure in his masculinity and he was very secure in his femininity. He had his divine feminine, his divine masculine really balanced out beautiful. And you and I've talked about that, about how we both have had to balance those two things within ourselves, and also how we try to inspire others to get in touch with both those sides of yourself. And it's okay one day to feel very masculine and the next day to feel very feminine, because Spirit has given us both of those things to be an equally important part of us. And he really got that, because he could be like a gruff, tough guy from New England, or he could be literally a fairy that you thought would be flying through the air with his divine feminine just glowing in him. And I think that's such a beautiful thing too, because everybody, gay, straight, or otherwise, everybody has to have that balance of those two things that lie within us.
Definitely.
I am so honored for you to be here, my friend, and I can't wait to see you face to face and give you a big hug. And
looking
thank
forward
you for being
to it.
Here.
Thank you. Blessings to you.
Thank you, sweetheart. My next friend is coming in all the way from Tennessee. And I want to tell you a little story of how this happened. So I've been friends with Charlene Tilton for almost 15 years. She's like my sister. I adore her soul and the beauty that lives within her. She is also a deeply spiritual person. So she has been living with her family in Nashville, and she was out here in Los Angeles, and I asked her to come and be a guest on a live broadcast of my daily radio show that I did pre-COVID at the Hollywood Improv. So she came up, she did my show, and she was talking about this new show that she had put together, a one-woman show called Tammy Faye Tweets, because she'd always had a very deep connection to Tammy Faye Baker. She did it, and and she was wonderful. The interview was fantastic. And the next day I'm driving, and she calls me and she tells me about the show. And she says that there's one piece that she's missing from the show. And it's that Tammy Faye interviewed this pastor in the 80s, and his name was Reverend Steve Pieters. And that she really wanted to make sure she had his permission to have somebody play him in the show, but she didn't know how to get a hold of him. And little did she know, he was one of my best friends. I mean, that's the serendipity, the wheel of it all that I keep talking about. So I said, do I know Steve Pieters? Let's all get together and have dinner. So the three of us got together in LA and we had dinner. I think the dinner lasted like 3 hours. And it was watching the two of them connect, Steve and Charlene, like they had been friends for 50 years. Was one of the most beautiful things I've ever encountered, because when you bring two people that you love together and then they love each other, that's when everything just clicks in perfectly in the universe. And they really did come together. And then Steve accompanied me to the opening night of her show, and we went together and sat together. And boy, the man that played him was fantastic and looked so much like him. So Charlene is here with me now. I had to tell that story. Hi, sweetheart. It's so wonderful to have you here.
Oh, hello, my darling. How are you?
I am wonderful. I'm so thrilled that you could make this. I know it was kind of last minute, and I know you've got like grandbabies and all kinds of exciting family things happening. But isn't that the weirdest story, that you randomly called me to ask about this man that you didn't know I knew? And
I know.
This man was one of my best friends.
crazy. Well, Tammy Faye had given me the rights to do her story. It was a film that sat at a couple of studios, and then, but I ended up doing it as a one-woman show, as you know. So anyway, I felt that because knowing Tammy Faye the way I did, I felt um, one of the most important parts of her story was her love for people.
Mm,
And at the time when the church, if you could call it the church, with the Falwells, the Swaggarts, and those people
right.
condemning um, people that were gay, saying that AIDS was a curse, that they were going to hell. Well, you know, Tammy Faye was saying, no, that's not true. And God loves you. And um, that was actually that was the beginning. Steve Peters' interview with her was the beginning of the end of PTL. That's what started the downfall of PTL,
Yeah.
because when she brought Steve Peters on, she angered everyone from John Wesley to all those people. And her husband, Jim Baker, said, I can't control her. And she said, look, God, you know, in that interview to Steve Peters, she says, well, God loves you, and we love you, and we're praying for you. And this was, you know, way before Elton John and Sharon Stone and Elizabeth Taylor, all these fabulous, amazing AIDS activists.
Yeah.
She was in the trenches, boy. She was in the trenches with AIDS patients when you did not know how it was spread.
Yes.
And she was laying hands and praying for AIDS patients when other people were, like, you know, in COVID hazmat suits. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Well, and Charlene, talking this hour as I am about inspiration, which is really the center of the sermon for this service, that others inspire us and then we inspire others. And that's the story of Tammy Faye, right? She was inspired by Steve and his story, and it inspired her to become an AIDS activist and an LGBTQI plus activist. Sometimes you just need to meet a person who's different and it changes your entire thinking. It's like a domino effect, right? And
abs-
something about that
yeah.
interview with him changed her forever. And in
Well,
her end years, right, she actually she like lived in Palm Springs and you know, taught hymns to drag queens, and I mean, she really became a part of the community.
yeah, she did. But I remember sitting with her and saying, you know, I have been around a lot of theologians. I have spent time with Billy Graham. I had an audience with the Pope. I was with Pastor Jack Hayford. I've been with, and I said to Tammy Faye when at dinner one night, and I said, you know, there's something about you that is, when people come up to us, is with somebody who's waiting on our table, giving us the evening specials or whatever. I said, just the love that I've never seen anything like God, the love of God
Mm-hmm.
just flow out from somebody and touch people. And she said, I was the biggest joke, the most hated person on the planet. And she said, I lay down and I said, God, either take me or use me as a vessel. I will only be an open vessel for your love. And she did. She loved people. She
Mm-hmm.
loved people, and she was not judgmental at a time when, again, the church, the so-called church at that time, was very judgmental. And that she was not like that. She was curious about people, and she loved, she had an ability to see people the way God sees them. And
Beautiful. Yeah.
you know,
You know, and I didn't realize until I watched Eyes of Tammy Faye that, of course, also had Steve represented in it, because I didn't know that much about the church. I didn't grow up and I didn't know that much about the Bakers. That, I mean, most of those ideas, the ideas for expansion, the ideas for creativity, the out of the box thinking for ministry, those were all her ideas. And she really didn't get much credit, probably because she was a woman, but she was the one that was really the light behind PTL. And then when she did her talk show and she started bringing in all these other subjects for Christian women to see. I mean, she really was breaking ground left and right, which is probably why she was so unpopular. But I think the face of you know, of nouveau evangelical spirituality, I think a lot of it is based on out of the box things, the out of the box kind of progressive kind, out of the box things that Tammy Faye brought to Christianity, to evangelical Christianity. And I think that a lot of that came from Steve, right? She saw a fearless man.
Tammy, no. Tammy always said, I never watered down my word. She said, I believe what the Bible says, but I love people.
Yeah.
And she kept it at, and she was very strict that she believed in very, not very strict, but very, always said, I believe what the Bible says. One thing that the movie didn't say, something that you just brought up, Tammy Faye had an IQ that was off the chart. She was invited to be a Mensa member. She never joined Mensa, but she went to several meetings. But her IQ was off the charts. And so even I had asked her, I said, okay, come on, Tammy, with all of this, you were there and with as smart as you are, you mean to tell me you didn't know what Jim Baker was spending on and what he was building when he built Heritage USA? And she said, no, I really didn't. And I think at that time, and you know what? That's what she said until she left this earth. And she swore that. And honestly, Jim Baker, he sold timeshares that weren't open properly or whatever at the right time.
Right.
Whatever. Anyway, but she at that point, he was so busy, she was busy. But here's the good news, that she loved people. Steve Pieters was a big part of that.
Yes.
And I'm just so thankful to you for bringing Steve and I together, because he became such a huge part of my life after that, as you know. So
isn't that beautiful? Yeah, I mean, but that's inspiration, right? I mean, and it was a daunting thing for him to go and do her show, and he was brave to go and do it, being a gay man with AIDS in an environment like that. But he was brave. That was just who Steve was. And I think that we talk so much about how kind he was, and that was the most beautiful thing about him. But he was also tough, and like you said about Tammy Faye, he was a staunch Christian. I mean, he believed in everything that was in the Bible, but he also believed there were room for all kinds of people. And when I started doing this interfaith service and reaching all different kinds of faiths, I learned more and more as I interviewed him on various shows and as he was a guest at this service many, many times, that he also believed in that you could be a staunch Christian and also believe in things beyond the boundaries of Christianity. And you could put together your own spiritual palette, and that everything that walked in the light and the love was part of God. And I think that's beautiful, because it always makes me sad when people either come out or something happens to them and then they feel like they can't be a part of their church anymore. And I don't want people to ever lose their faith in God because of something a person did to make them feel like it wasn't okay, right? And I love that he preached that message.
Me too. He was a dear friend, special, and thank you for bringing us together. And and I love you, and I miss you so much.
I know I love you, and I miss you too. I'm maybe going to come out that way next year, and I'm thinking about driving across the country with the cat. So I want to make sure to see you, and I congratulations on your beautiful grandbabies.
Thank you. Yes, they're 2 years old and 6 years old. So I'm very busy with them, and I love them, and so much fun.
Thank you so much for being here, my friend. I appreciate you.
Thank you, my gorgeous. Keep spreading your love and light. We love you.
I promise. I love you too. Take care.
Goodbye.
Isn't that a beautiful story? I mean, it's how I love when people I love each other. To me, we're one human family, and we need to function more as one human family. So earlier, we talked a little bit about, I think Orlando's name came up when Keith was talking, that when Keith and Steve came to see my vibration gathering and Orlando was there, that Keith turned to the left and met the person next to him, and they became friends. And then we started this service that Keith and I and Alejandro put together. And it seemed like the logical choice to ask Orlando to come and be the musical director. Now I'm hoping that we're virtual, that maybe he'll come and we'll do that again, and we'll do it with this software. But please, my darling, wonderful friend and singing partner, Orlando de la Paz, is here to talk a little bit about Steve and how did you meet Steve? It was obviously through Allison, but when did you meet him, Orlando?
I'm trying to I'm trying to place it. You can hear me, right?
I hear you great.
Okay. I'm sorry. I haven't stopped crying since this.
I know. Me
since
too.
This started.
It's okay. Me too.
I'll have to say it all began, of course, with Allison Arngrim.
Sure.
So I met Allison on her 40th birthday. And I met her within 2 days, because then we were all having, like you met Allison at a birthday party at a restaurant, and that's how I met Allison through another
Right.
friend of mine.
Right.
And I sat across from her, and in my heart I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm sitting across Nellie Olson. But I didn't say anything, I just said, but she looked at me like she could tell.
Of course.
So she says, would you like a picture and an autograph? And I'm like, yes, please. And there's a picture. I can't find it now. There's a picture of me and Allison that night when we first met, and she's hugging me, and she's behind me, and I'm in front. I don't know where that picture went, but so that was the first time. And then the second time I met Allison was on her. We're going to talk about Steve. We'll get there. The second time I met Allison I was at the time that she met me, I was actually the youth minister at All Saints Church in Pasadena. I was the junior high youth minister. So one of the things that we wanted to do for the summer, I can't remember what year it was, but the Episcopal Church decided that they were going to have a float at the Pride Parade. So I said, well, I can't miss the opportunity of having a Pride Parade with the Episcopal Church and not have our children there. So I took with me 300 youth from our parish and another parish, and we marched at the Gay Pride Parade and singing "This Little Light of Mine" for all the people. And then I don't know how the children acquired these flowers, but they did. And because before we got there, I said, you guys are going to be meeting some adversity in the crowds, especially the Phelps people, who I'm talking about.
Yeah, sure.
So I says, I think if you reward them with kindness instead of talking back, or, because they're expecting to do that. So they're marching, they're singing "This Little Light of Mine," and then they go, 2, 4, 6, 8, Jesus loves you, gay or straight, and then they handed out the flowers to the Phelps people, and that just kind of diffused them, which was awesome. And I was actually on the float with other youth ministers, and our bishop at the time, John Bruno, was on the thing. And that was the second time I met Allison, because as soon as I got off the float, she was right there to say hello and all that. But then we lost contact for a while. And then one day, from that, then I became a scenic painter in theater. Weird transformation, but it did. And this play I was doing called Little House Christmas happened, and I reconnected then with Allison. It might have been, I don't know, maybe 6-7 years that had passed since I saw her at that parade. But that Little House Christmas thing was what began everything, because after we had finished, painting it and putting it on, then one night I heard that Allison was bringing a few people with her, because one of the cast members was also her friend, the guy who played Mr. Edwards. So Allison brought Rachel and Danny and Charlotte and Dan McBride and Wendy that night. And I ended up sitting next to Charlotte Randall Yerke, and we just became instant friends. And then the Q&A came up, and I said, oh, you got to be up there, Charlotte. You got to. And that gave me an idea. This is leading up to how I met you, by the way.
Oh.
I said, I think I want to put on a little house event with the same kind of thing, with a Q&A and maybe an autograph show. So I decided to do one, but I needed a host. And then Danny told me, Danny Sanchez, Rachel Lindsay Greenbush's husband, who played Baby Carrie, he said, oh, I know a person that you can get. Her name is Sheena Metal. She's great. I said, okay. So I believe I called you or I emailed you, right? And
Yeah.
I said, would you like to host our event at the Colony Theater in Burbank? And so that started that friendship. And then another birthday party, I believe it was Allison's birthday party. And
Yeah.
that's where I met Steve Pieters,
Yeah.
if I recall.
And did you know right away how magic he was?
Not yet. And not until the Saturday Night Spiritual.
Oh, okay.
You know?
Okay. So you became,
And
as
then-
we all became a Saturday Night Spiritual family.
Yeah.
That's
And
really
then-
when we all became a family.
And then of course, then he and I talked a little bit, not very deeply or anything like that. But so when I saw him at that Raising the Vibration
Yeah.
thing that you were holding the night I met Keith, I was already, at least there was somebody that I was familiar with. But I was so glad I sat next to Keith, because then that kind of introduced me to the Founders MCC.
Yeah.
And at the time, of course, I was still having some spiritual doubts about coming back to church again, because it was, I can talk about that on another time. But
we kind of came back to church, and we should do it. You should come and do my radio show, and we should talk about that, because you and I both kind of came back to church at the same time.
Yeah,
And we were both a little weary about it.
And the strange thing is, I studied to become a priest, so I had gone through philosophy and theology, and done my biblical scholarship, and done the historical Jesus and all that kind of stuff. But anyway,
because you're a brilliant musician, you actually have a song today, which is
I do.
I would love for you to do
and so
that.
this is what's going to lead me. Hold on, one of my music fell down. Let me just get it. So one of the things that Steve and I had in common, one besides our faith, I think, is our love for Disney, and particularly his love for Tinkerbell, and that whole idea of the magic wand and spreading that pixie dust everywhere. And one of the lines that I put, I did a painting for him with Tinkerbell on it, and it says, all you need is love and trust, and a little bit of pixie dust.
I love that.
So I had actually written a song for today, but I decided, you know what, that's not gonna fly, because this is more who Steve is. So I'm gonna try not to cry.
You're gonna be fine.
While I do this, I'm
be
probably
right here with
going
you,
to.
friend. I got you, baby.
But anyway, I think this song exemplifies everything about Steve, and you'll recognize it as soon as I start playing it.
Okay.
I think. I know a place where dreams are born and time is never planned. It's not on any chart. You can find it in your heart. Never, never land. It might be miles beyond the moon, and right there where you stand. Just think, just keep an open mind, and then suddenly you'll find never, never land. You'll have a treasure if you stay there, more precious far than gold. For once you found your way there, you can never, never grow old. So come with me where dreams are born and time is never planned. Just think of lovely things and your heart will fly on wings forever. It never, never land.
So beautiful, my friend. I love you. Thank you so
Love
much
you.
for being here, and I'll see you soon.
Okay.
What a beautiful way to take that out for Steve. It's so beautiful. We're talking about Reverend Steve Pieters. He was a long-term pastor at the Metropolitan Community Church denomination and many years at Founders MCC, where I am also pastored. This is the Saturday Night Spiritual special service that we do every second Saturday of the month for people interested in interfaith spirituality and how we all are interfaith, because all spirituality, all different religions and faiths under the blanket of God is what interfaith is. So if you believe in anything and you understand other people believe in other things, then guess what? You're interfaith. We're at foundersmcc.org, SaturdayNightSpiritual.com, Rev Sheena, FoundersMCC.com, and you can find me at SheenaMetalSpiritual.com and all over social media at Sheena Metal. And of course, Founders has a wonderful Facebook page and a wonderful YouTube page, and the links to everything are going up, including how you can donate to the church throughout the show. Honoring our friend Steve Pieters, another gift that I got through him from that radio show where all the Founders pastors came was my wonderful friend, Reverend Lucia Chappelle, who's with us today. What an honor to meet her through Steve. And, you know, I think growing up in the 80s in Orange County, I had this idea that Christians were all a certain way, even though my mother called herself a Teachings of Christ Christian. Getting to know now Pastor Keith, Reverend Alejandro, Reverend Steve, Reverend Lucia, I learned a lot about how many devout Christians also had other bits of faith and beliefs woven into their Christianity and a mysticism that I believe that Jesus had. So Reverend Lucia is with us now, and I'm so honored to have you here, my darling friend. How are you?
Well, I'm as well as can be expected on this day. But it's good to see you, Sheena. Hello, and thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. I can't even imagine. And it's so funny because I was so sad going into this and cried through the first 5 minutes. And now I feel like exalted. And I think it's the love of all of you. But I also think it's the magic of Steve being here with us and not wanting us to be sad, but wanting us to do a tribute to him that is joyous.
And the one thing, you know what keeps coming back to me this last week is I keep hearing Stephen's laugh.
Yes.
I keep hearing him laugh. And oh my goodness, did we ever used to laugh a lot?
Yes. Yes. You know what I was thinking about yesterday in the shower, where I do a lot of my thinking? I was thinking about how, you know, most people just talk and talk and talk and talk. But in a group, Steve was often the one listening. He was listening. You would look at him and catch him with that sweet smile, right, on his face, just watching everyone and listening to what people were saying. And I think we could all learn a lesson from that a lot of times you got to turn off your send and turn on your receive and just see what's going on around you. He was really someone who was fascinated by life.
He was studying characters.
Yes.
We're acting students, you know.
Yeah.
We study characters wherever we are.
Yes. Yes. And he definitely did that. How did he inspire you? What is something in your life where you feel, sweetheart, you're forever changed for knowing him?
Well, you know, and this is where I just don't know what I'm going to do anymore. Stephen, and we did this with each other, but I think it was mostly in my direction. Like the night before having to preach, I would call Steve in a panic.
Mm.
And it was always the same thing. It was always, why did I ever agree to do this? This is, oh my God, what am I doing? What am I saying? And Steve would just talk me down. You know, he would
Yes.
just talk me down and say, okay, now what have you got in your outline? What's the point? What's this? What's that? And he would just get me all calmed down so that I could do a sermon. And, you know, at the end of it, he would just always say, you've got this. Don't worry. You've got this. You're fine. And so that, you know, that was one of our big things. And there were just so many. And, you know, I mean, you have to understand, I knew Steve before there was AIDS.
Yeah.
I mean, before there was AIDS in the world, not just before there was AIDS with him. So we were teammates. You know, we were both young clergy, both insecure young clergy, because that's how we come out of the box, you know.
Yes.
And so we always had each other's backs in all the wonderful and horrible things that go on in your life when you're a young clergy person. You know, your first pastorate, your first this, your first that. Some exalted, some miserable. And we just carried each other through all those kinds of things.
Yeah. Yes. And he was still right, because then me coming out as a minister in my 50s, early 50s, he was the same way with me. He guided me through that. And he was the first person I told I was terrified to be a minister. And he made me feel like it was just the easiest thing in the world I would ever do. And he was right. And that's that is one of the things I loved about him the most, was he never missed an opportunity to inspire someone. He never missed an opportunity to uplift you and make you feel, like you said earlier, like you got this. That was so what he would say about everything. And I was terrified to take communion the first time I went to a founder's service with him. I'd never taken communion in my life. And, you know, I grew up Presbyterian, where communion is you have some punch and a piece of coffee cake. I'd never, ever had taken, and I didn't think I was going to do it. And he went down and did it. He's like, no pressure. I understand if you don't want to do it. Then I'm sitting there and I'm watching everybody. And I looked at him and I said, I think I'm going to do it. And he's like, I think you should. And I kind of shakily legged walked up there and got communion from Pastor Keith. And you were there as well then, Lucia, giving communion to people. And I just felt like I belonged. And it's funny, I know I've told this story on this service so many times, but my mother never got me baptized. She felt like you shouldn't imprint spiritual beliefs onto a child. And she said, someday you will find the church where you belong, and then you will know. And I never in a million years thought that I would find the church where I belonged. And then because of Steve, I did. And then for all of you to have been there at my baptism, I mean, all of that, right? I mean, it's just, I found the place where I belonged, but I got led there by this wonderful being that was Steve Pieters. And I think he did that for so many people and helped so many people in the queer community to come back to God when they felt they had been rejected and left. And I mean, that's pure Christ path work, right? And he just made it all seem so easy. Like Allison Argram said earlier, he would give a beautiful, glorious talk to somebody about spirituality and love, and then sit down and eat McDonald's and not even, I mean, like he hadn't just done it. So, you know, there was just such beauty in him. And I'm so glad we're celebrating him today. And I'm so honored you're here with me to do so.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be here. May I tell you a secret? Do we have a little bit of time for me to tell you?
Please, yes.
now we've told this story a little bit, but not all that much. This Tammy Faye interview.
Right.
I got home. Stephen and I were neighbors. I got home and he calls me up. He says, "Come over now. I've got to talk to you." So I came over and he said, "You'll never believe who wants to interview me. Tammy Faye Bakker." And you know what our response was, Sheena?
Huh.
We fell over laughing. We laughed so hard with the tears rolling down our cheeks. I think I probably slid off the chair and was rolling on the floor. We laughed so hard at the idea of Stephen being interviewed by Tammy Faye Bakker. And I'll tell you, there were people that we knew that said he shouldn't do it.
I bet. Yes.
That's, either she'll make a fool of you or you'll make a fool of her. Somebody's going to turn out to be a fool. You just don't know. He got home from the interview and I came over and he said, "Thank God no one I know will ever see this."
Oh. Yeah.
Thank God. No,
Yeah.
because he was sure he had totally blown it. He had no idea, and her responses and his reactions, and he said, I thank God no one I know will ever see this.
And he was brilliant and he was beautiful.
He was brilliant. He was brilliant. He was amazing.
People can't get enough of it. First in Charlene's one-woman show, then in the Jessica Chastain's movie, and then Elton John's musical, right? People just couldn't get enough of Steve Pieters.
It lived on in YouTube all these years.
Yeah.
And he was saying, and oh my God, she said after she got done with me, she came back on and was pointing her finger at the camera, talking about the Christians that needed to embrace people with AIDS, and her mascara was running, and oh my God. And we laughed again. We laughed some more. And I just said, "Don't worry, honey. It's PTL or it's Tammy Facial or whatever. It'll be buried. It'll never see the surface again." And
well,
look
but
what
if you
happened.
go back, and you can all go on YouTube and watch that interview, you will see that what Steve brings, right, Lucia, is incredible inner strength and incredible grace.
The way I always thought of it, Sheena, is he pastored her.
Yes. And he changed her forever.
Just like if she was an MCer's elderly auntie coming to church for the first time.
Yes.
He pastored her.
He did. And she was forever changed, and then became such a huge contributor to the community because she had been changed by him. And that's that wheel of inspiration we've been talking about all hour. Thank you for being here, my friend. I love you, and I so appreciate that you're here.
Love you too, darling. And thank you for doing this for Stephen. There will be more.
There will be more. That is for sure. Take care, darling.
You too.
So somebody who met Steve through my Saturday night spiritual service, who also became a regular musical guest and a speaker. My wonderful friend Bill Funt is here to round out the show, to talk a little bit about being somebody who didn't come from the Christian world, didn't come from the queer world, just was a wonderfully talented person that I knew, that I asked to be part of the service. And because it's an interfaith service, I thought he could bring his experience growing up as a Jewish man to the service. And then he and I began singing together, and he's performed music at a lot of the services. So he was there with Steve a lot. And I'm going to bring Bill in today to talk a little bit about his experiences with Steve and what it was like to meet Steve and to become part of the Saturday Night Spiritual Service. Hello, my friend. It's so good to see your face.
Great to see you. Great to be part of this and to see all my old Founders MCC friends who I miss a lot now that I'm across the country.
But don't you think now that we've discovered this, and I have the beautiful Emery to produce and engineer, now we can bring the old Saturday Night Spiritual back virtually, and you
That's
can
right.
come and sing again. How do you feel about that?
Just say when. I'd love
That
to.
sounds good. We got you there. We got Charlene in Tennessee. There's people all over the world now.
Yeah.
What was your experience when you met Steve? I mean, how did you feel? Because you were at a lot of services together.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I met Steve just by participating in the services, and I heard him speak one night and tell his story, and I was incredibly impressed. I was a teenager in the 80s, and I used to make fun of Jim and Tammy Faye, and as we all did back then. And so, getting that different perspective about them was edifying. But then just his story, I mean, obviously the man survived a lot, literally survived a lot.
Yeah.
But he was such a warm guy, and he was one of those people who had room in his heart for everybody. I mean, notwithstanding how many people wanted to meet him and talk with him, he really had room for everybody, and he made everyone, myself included, feel like they were the most important person in the room, because at that moment that they were talking to him, they were. And another thing I really loved about him was he was not the type of person to minimize your own struggle that you may come to him about just because of his struggles. I mean,
exactly.
he didn't. If you said that you were feeling depressed, he wouldn't counter with, "Well, I have AIDS. Shut up."
Right. Exactly. Yes. Right.
So that was always appreciated. Oh, there we all are.
And that's really, I think, an inspiration for all of us, right? That I have a friend who's a spiritual healer, and she has this expression that when you give a healing, you get a healing. Mm-hmm. And I think it's true. I think as you now taking care of your elderly mom,
mm-hmm.
as I did, when you take care of someone else, God takes care of you. And it feels good to be helping others. And when you help others, you get helped. And I think that he understood that you weren't supposed to just sit and be sad because things had happened to you. You were supposed to be finding a way to reach other people and put all the love inside of you somewhere. And it kept him alive, right? For 30 something years.
Yeah.
Every time they wrote him off. I mean, I think we're all a little shocked he's gone. I keep waiting to get a phone call and hear he's suddenly resurrected from somewhere, because I didn't think anything would ever be able to kill him, because he just lived in such a very holy place, a place of grace where he didn't allow the things that were going wrong in his physical body to affect his ability to love other people. And I think that is maybe the most inspiring thing about him.
Well, it would be easy to conclude, even if you knew better, that because of everything he survived, that maybe he was immortal.
Right. I'm still not convinced. I still am looking for the fairy wand dinging outside my front door and for him to come on in.
Sure.
But I know he'll always be with us, and I know he loved you. And that's why I wanted you to be here today.
I loved him too. I mean, I should point out that unlike a lot of other people who are talking tonight, I wasn't in an awful lot of his life. I met him relatively towards the end of it.
Yeah.
And that goes back to my original point about him having a lot of room in his heart. I mean, I didn't put in the kind of time with him that Olan did, or Allison did, or you did, or the Reverend did, but here I am on the panel with all of you. And so that said a lot. Another thing I loved about him is that he had when he had to say no, he did it in such a gentle way. And what I'm referring to is a year ago, he was taking a vacation in Lake Winnipesaukee.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't remember if he had a house there, if he was staying
I
with
think he
somebody.
came from there. Yes.
Right, exactly. And I was already in New York by then. And when you're in Manhattan in the summer, you relish any chance you can to get to the country for
Yeah.
the summer because boy, is it hot here. And we're in the middle of that right now.
Oh yeah.
And it's hotter in the city. And I talked to them about maybe coming up to visit him, and he was very comprehensive in his answer. He just said, I would love to see you, and I'm going to have to say no because I just don't have the energy right now to host in that way."
I love that.
And similarly, a few months ago, maybe about a month ago, right now Jessica Chastain is on Broadway in A Doll's House, and I was thinking of going to see it. I'd still like to go see it, and I messaged him and I said something along the lines of, I'd love to see it. Shall I try to say hello to her and say you sent me? And he goes, no, Bill, not right now. She's as great as our rapport is. I have been instructed not to send too many people her way in that way. And so I said, okay, that's fine.
That's wonderful. Beautifully and respectful. Yeah. He was always that way. I thank you so much for being here, my friend. Thank you for your beautiful stories and for being a friend to him and for being a friend to me and to this service.
Do we have time to talk about the phone call? Because that's
Sure.
the one I really came here to
Yeah.
say. One of the things I do, this is my favorite memory of Steve. One of the things that I do with my mom, who I'm taking care of, is every week for Shabbat, including today, we have basically we observe it by having meals and watching movies. And one weekend, we were watching Eyes of Tammy Faye, and we were both enjoying it very much. And I messaged Steve. I had my phone in my hand while I was watching it, and I messaged Steve and I said, my mother and I are really enjoying the movie. And so all of a sudden the phone rings and it's Steve. And I said to my mom, you know, that the gay minister that Tammy Faye is interviewing in the scene right now, he's calling us on the phone. And we just laughed about it. Never before has a character in a movie called me. I mean, it'd be like if you're watching, it's like if you're watching Back to the Future. It's one thing if Michael J. Fox calls you. It's another thing entirely if Marty McFly calls
Exactly.
you. You know,
Exactly.
So
That's fantastic, and what a treat for your mom.
yeah. Oh yeah. She dug it.
That's just how Steve was. He was just a love. Sweetie, I thank you so much for being here. It means a lot to me.
Thank you.
Take care of you.
Okay.
What a wonderful group of people, all sharing their memories of Steve. I'll tell you the truth. I've had the flu, and technically last week was the second Saturday of the month, and I completely forgot about it because I was sick. Pastor Keith texted me and said, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "What is it?" "Oh no, I forgot." So we moved it to this week, and then Steve passed the night that Pastor Keith and I were talking about how Steve was doing. He was passing at that time, and I think it was wonderful that I missed it last week, so we could do this tonight. If you love Steve, please try to take with you some of the beautiful things that he did for the world. And know that he's always with you, as our loved ones are always with us. And I'm going to leave you with, first of all, find us at foundersmcc.org, SaturdayNightSpiritual.com to watch the archives, Rev Sheena, foundersmcc.com. I'm at SheenaMetalSpiritual.com. You can find me on social media at Sheena Metal. Please reach out. I love that. I love to hear from you. But I used to say this at the end of every sermon, and Steve loved it. So I will say it now. Seek peace, live in love, lead with kindness, embrace unity, always work to raise your vibration, and know that you are love, and you are loved, and you are loved by me. And you know that I always end with a poem. So this is for you, Steve. It's by Joanna Fuchs, and it's called Because You Are My Friend. Because you are my friend, my life is enriched in a myriad of ways. Like a cool breeze on a sweltering day, like a ray of sunshine parting glowering clouds. You lift me up. In good times, we soar like weightless balloons over neon rainbows. In bad times, you're a soothing balm for my pummeled soul. I learned so much from you. You help me see old things in new ways. I wonder if you're aware of the bright seeds you are sowing in me. I'm a better person for knowing you, so that everyone I interact with is touched by your good effect on me. You relax me, you refresh me, renew me. Your bounteous heart envelops me in joy and love and peace. And your life was filled with dazzling blessings, just as I'm blessed by being your friend. I love you, Reverend Steve Pieters. I'm the Reverend Sheena Metal. This is Saturday Night Spiritual. And we'll see you next month.